All right, now let's talk about exactly what's in front of everyone's eyes last night over there on Taxpayer TV, when the New South Wales Environment Minister, the bloke who, of course, wanted to get the ghost back involved in politics, then, of course, that didn't happen. But then his boss, the Premier of New South Wales, went running over to the ghost's house on the weekend to say, "Oh, happy birthday, Luce. I'm so sorry about this week, you know, that evil News Corp." Ugh. Anyway, more importantly, with the Upper Hunter by-election coming up in the next few weeks and coal being absolutely at the heart of the agenda, what this bloke said on television last night is unbelievable for a few different reasons. Pay attention.
If you're going to get to net zero emissions by 2050, then you need to be out of fossil fuels by the mid-2030s. So yes, we need gas now, but we need a plan to move away from gas. I'll listen to the engineers and the experts. That's exactly how we design energy policy in New South Wales. New South Wales energy policy is determined by engineers, experts and economists, not ideologues.
Well, Paul, what he's saying there is that New South Wales energy policy is to get rid of fossil fuels in 14 years' time, in 2035. So coal gone, gas gone, petrol-driven cars most likely gone. Isn't this just the most amazing announcement from a guy who hates fossil fuels to say, if you're going to get to net zero emissions by 2050, you need to get out of fossil fuels by the mid-2030s, 14 years from now. So he's worse than Turnbull. For the coal miners in the Hunter Valley, this bloke is worse than Turnbull. And maybe Nicholas can explain it, but I've not heard in this debate that to get to net zero carbon in 2050, 15 years earlier, you need to get rid of coal, gas, petrol-driven cars. That is no carbon in 2035. Why have you got to do that to get to net zero 15 years later?
Yeah, great point.
Nobody's ever sort of heard of this mathematics. Albanese is not even saying that. I don't think Adam Bandt's even saying that. So Matt Keane has gone way out on the extreme left of politics to announce that in 14 years' time, if you're a coal miner, you work in gas-fired manufacturing, you drive a petrol-driven car, fossil fuels are out, kaput, zero, in New South Wales.
And under that legislation that they were able to squeeze through the Parliament, how can he achieve that if he wanted to?
Well, that was for closing down coal-fired power stations. But again, it's a terrible message to investors. Energy Australia has two big projects. They would want to run their Mount Piper a coal-fired power station near Lithgow through to 2042. So under Keane's announcement, it's got to close now 7 years earlier than scheduled, which is blackouts in New South Wales. That company is also looking at Tallawarra B in the Illawarra as a gas-fired power plant to keep the lights on, because when the sun's not shining, the wind's not blowing, you can turn these gas peaking plants on very quickly. 15 minutes later, they're running to fill the gap left by the intermittent renewables. Well, why would Energy Australia go ahead with that investment if Matt Keane's saying, well, you can open it in a couple of years' time, but it's going to have to close in 2035. You put millions into it, and it's got a shelf life of 13 years. This is an investment killer. It's actually a killer of his own renewables plan, and it's worse than Turnbull. Not even Turnbull said all fossil fuels are ending in New South Wales in 14 years' time.
Now, Nicholas, again, what is exceptional here is that this was unexceptional. Can
Nick explain why this is necessary to meet the net zero 2050 objective? Why?
Well, I mean, I actually want to test a bit of reality here with you, Mark. Do you accept that Australia will get to zero net emissions by 2050? Yes or no?
Well, that's not the question I'm asking. I'm asking you as an advocate of this.
Well, no, I'm asking you that
policy.
question. I want you to answer it.
No.
USA's committed to it. UK's committed to it. Do you think Australia will get there?
I don't believe in targets in Australia as long as China is powering ahead with, in some cases, 200 times our emissions in India. I don't believe in Australia setting targets when China makes those targets look ridiculous at the cost of blue-collar workers. But, Nick, I did ask you a question as an advocate in this area. You don't have to defend Matt Keane, who you might note is on the opposite party to you, the Liberal Party, but can you explain why, to get to net zero 2050, you need to eliminate all fossil fuels 15 years earlier than that?
No, I can't. But the bigger point here is that you're refusing to talk reality to people. You're saying you can't see Australia getting to zero emissions by 2050, whereas Blind Freddie will tell you that's what's going to happen, because that's what the whole world is doing.
So not going to happen.
So you're selling fantasies to people, Mark. You're selling fantasies to people, trying to tell them that something that the whole world is doing is never going to happen.
Okay, well, it won't happen.
You need to be straight with people. You need to be straight with people.
No idea what's going to happen in 2050. 2050.
Nick, every
You
week
just
you
said saying to
advocate
people,
this.
just keep doing what you're doing. You can go on doing it forever. And you know that's not the truth.
Okay.
Every week you make this point, Nick, and you say get rid of coal, get rid of gas, and it's all gone by 2050. But you're doing this. You're wiping out these blue-collar jobs in places like the Hunter Valley, supposedly to do something about climate change. So the bigger, absolutely crucial question for you is your policy. What impact does it have on average global surface temperatures by 2050? What will be the reduction in global temperatures for what you're doing to eliminate all these fossil fuel industries in Australia and destroy hundreds of thousands of jobs? What's the impact on the problem you're trying to solve?
So again, Mark, Hunter Valley can have a prosperous future in agriculture, in tourism,
that's not
in
the question I
equine,
asked
which
you.
you
What's
seem
the
to
impact on
Equine, horses,
and yet you don't want to have that conversation with people in Hunter Valley because you want to keep running this fantasy that coal's going to go on forever and ever and ever, and you refuse to face up to the target that the rest of the world is embracing.
What's the answer? What's the impact on temperatures of your big thing you repeat here week after week after week like a broken record of getting to net zero 2050? What's the impact on the climate change problem that you're worried about?
Well, what I can tell you is that if the world is going to avoid dangerous climate change, a rise of 2 degrees, then we need to get down to zero emissions by 2050. And what I can tell you categorically, Mark, is that Australia needs to play its part in doing that, okay?
You've got no answer. You can't quantify the impact you're having on climate change
in getting
for the destruction of blue-collar jobs.
by 2050.
Well, you can't quantify Australia's contribution.
I'm telling you Australia needs to play its part. Australia needs to play its part of getting
what is that part, Nick? How much is our part?
And doing that by zero emissions by 2050.
But again,
we need to join other countries like the USA, like the United Kingdom, like Germany, like New Zealand, like all the countries we compare ourselves to. They're all going zero by 2050. We need to do the same.
Well, that is the fraud. That he would destroy blue-collar jobs. He would destroy them.
Can I provide just a little bit of data?
For nothing, you can't describe.
The fraud is that you won't talk to these people about jobs of the future.
Complete, utter fraud.
You won't talk truth to them, Mark. You're telling them a fantasy that these jobs are going to go on for decades and decades and decades to come.
Nick, you tell them for sacrificing their jobs. You tell them, Nick, what's the impact on global temperatures? You tell them right now. They're sacrificing their jobs. They're not some university lecturer in inner Melbourne. They're working in blue-collar work in the Hunter Valley. Their jobs are gone. The jobs of their kids are gone. You tell them right now. You talk about truth. You tell them right now the impact on the problem you're worried about, climate change. What will be the reduction in global temperatures for that sacrifice?
Well, no, I'm sorry, Mark. You're playing the person. You're attacking me over my job, where I live. You're not playing the issue. You're not. And that's when I know you're losing an argument. When you start playing me, playing the person, and not the issue, I know you've lost the argument. And the reason you've lost is because you're not talking truth to people in Hunter Valley, and you're not prepared to say that at some point there needs to be a transition.
I'll answer your question. What they get for their sacrifice? Nothing. Nothing. China approved the construction of a 36.9 GW, you know what that is?
Gigawatts.
That's it. That's a lot of coal-fired capacity last year. That's 3 times more than they approved the previous year. China is building new plants as we speak. They are increasing their capacity and their output whilst we're hamstringing our industries, we're costing ourselves jobs, we've got enormous power bills for households and businesses when China is laughing at our antics. And yes, the net effect for the environment will be zero, but the net effect for Australia and those workers will be enormous. And that is something that the likes of Nicholas don't want to talk about. They say, oh, just go get a job in equine. Because, you know,
Nicholas, join me over at camera one. Join me over at camera one.
Yeah, why is Rita wrong in saying that? That's truth. That's truth.
Here's the thing first, right? See this? 2030. Under the Paris Agreement, China can continue to do whatever the hell it wants till 2030. Then here's another number, 2060. That is when China says it's going to get to net zero 10 years after places like the United States would be doing so. 2035, that's when Matt Keane says no more fossil fuels in New South Wales. Seriously, it is not a level playing field.